Hi, AJ here. Welcome back to Art Isn't Easy. So, today is going to be a very big day because we are introducing a new series to the channel. Now, granted, this channel's still new, so everything is kind of new, so that's kind of redundant, but no matter what, it's a new series. So, I used to write a blog, and I know blogs aren't really in vogue anymore, but on this blog, I did a series where I would choose a decade and then I would go year by year stating what the best films were, in my opinion, for that year. And I did it for the 1960s, the 1970s, and the 1990s. Now, my goal is to do videos based on all of those decades, but I would also like to do it on the 50s, the 80s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. I might consider doing the 30s and 40s, but that might need I need to like revisit some films because it's been a while since I've seen a lot of films that I would consider from that time. So today we are going to start with the 1960s. Now, what does one say about the 1960s? I mean, did anything even happen in that decade? Well, I mean, Kennedy assassination, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, civil rights movement, that war in Vietnam, or as Forrest Gump would say, Vietnam. But yes, the 60s were quite chaotic. But what I find fascinating about the 60s is how different it was in the beginning of the decade compared to the end of the decade. Like, I feel like it's such a drastic contrast, more so than any other decade. I mean, granted, I wasn't alive then, but it just seems that way from a historical standpoint. Like, think about a movie like American Graffiti that came out in 1973. That film, even though it feels like the 50s, was set in 1962. But it's like, it just feels like so unlike how America would be just like a few years later. Now, I do think that's very true for American cinema because I do feel like Hollywood was still very much behind the rest of the world. They're just like essentially kicking our ass more or less because like films coming out of like Japan, Sweden, and those two countries alone probably tell you the kind of filmmakers we're going to see on this list. But I will say that I love talking about a lot of these foreign films because they were substantially better than what we were dishing out. And of course, there are a couple of like exceptions. In fact, this list I'm going to be discussing 15 films, and only two of them are from Hollywood. And frankly, they are very great films that I'm going to be talking about. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with five honorable mentions and then go through a top 10. Now, this number might vary year to year. There are some years that I will do just 10 films, and that's that, probably if the year is a little bit weak. Some years I might do as many as 20. So I'm going to try and keep that in mind with time. So I will keep talking about my honorable mentions at a minimum so I can focus a little more on the top 10. But so we're going to start with 1960, and the first film at number 15 is Louis Malle's Zazie dans le Metro. Now, this one is interesting because it came out during the early days of the French New Wave, but Louis Malle was not really considered part of that group. But this film is so fascinating because, well, one, it's in color, because a lot of the films at that time in the French New Wave were in black and white. It's in color. It's from the point of view of a little girl, and there's a lot of chaos. It's very vibrant. There's something that's so pulsating about it that it just feels very much like a more. It's almost like a touch of like I was gonna say Young Girls of Roquefort, but I don't know if that's really a fair comparison. There's just a lot of life in it, so I do think that one is worth checking out. I know it doesn't really have its fans, but at number 14, we have Cyril Frankel's Never Take Sweets from a Stranger. Are you ready for some pedophilia? Because my God, I cannot believe this movie was made in 1960. Now, so Never Take Sweets from a Stranger is a British film, and it's about a British family who relocates to Canada so the father of the family can become a school principal. The young daughter meets a girl in the neighborhood, and they go into the woods, and this old man essentially like accosts them for like to like dance for him. And it turns out later that this old man is a very wealthy and respected member of the community. So, needless to say, the community is going to protect that wealthy man because, I mean, by golly, all rich people are lovely. Am I right? Hmm. So, number 13. This one might make some of you a little bit angry because it's rather low compared to what some people might do. But it is Jean Luc Godard's Breathless, which is a very important film in the French New Wave movement. I mean, obviously, I like it because it's on this list, but I do feel like Godard has never connected with me in the same way that like Truffaut has, or Jacques Demy, or Jean-Pierre Melville, Eric Romer, like all of that, or Agnes Varda. But like, it's just like it's I do appreciate what he was doing because it definitely is the kind of film that did give a certain like energy that was very unlike anything else. I mean, I do prefer 400 Blows by Truffaut to it by a mile, but Breathless is very iconic for a reason. Now, at number 12, we're going to talk about a Japanese filmmaker that doesn't get a lot of attention these days, and that is Mikio Naruse. And this is his film, The Approach of Autumn. Now, this one is very bittersweet. And I do think Naruse is very similar to Yasushiro Ozu because he's very focused on domestic stories in a way that like someone like Akira Kurosawa was not, because he was more into like suspenseful or action or like those types of movies. But Approach of Autumn is told from the point of view of like a young boy whose father passes away and his mom sends him to live with relatives. But the mom essentially neglects him. And there is a lot of like on a bittersweet feeling of him getting close to his family while his mother essentially just kind of washes her hands of him. And it's not a it's I mean it's a sweet movie, but it's also very like bleak at the same time. But Naruse is we haven't heard the last from him because he is going to be featured later on this list. Some of you might already know what film that is, but I'll hold the suspense otherwise. Now at number 11, we have Macario, which is by Roberto Gavaldon. Now this film was from Mexico, and it was the first film from Mexico to get a Best Foreign Language Film nomination, which it would lose to a film that's, spoiler alert, going to be on this list later. Now, Macario is a film that I would say very much tells that story of like all the poor want is a little bit of help, but instead people above them just continue basically ruining it for them because eat the rich. Like all this man wants is a meal. He just wants to have this dinner, and yet he keeps getting interrupted. It's almost like you take The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman and even like elements of A Christmas Carol, because there's like spirits involved. It's a very interesting film, and I do wish more people would talk about it today. But with that, we're going to go to our top 10. And this one's another Japanese film, this one by Kaneto Shindo, and it is The Naked Island. So the fascinating thing about The Naked Island is it's almost like a relic from another time, in that it is a film that's mostly void of dialogue. A lot of it is told just through various like moments of people like children playing, like people working, but that's what's it's just so it's such a fascinating like story about just like watching this family living on a small like sort of like rural island near off the coast of Hiroshima. In fact, there is a scene in it where the family goes to Hiroshima and they marvel at like the technology of television. But then the film takes this pivot where tragedy befalls them and they have to get back to the island. And I feel like The Naked Island is one of those films where like I was not expecting it to go the way that it went. So it did throw me for a loop. But I do feel like it's a film that people should see. But it's not for everybody. I mean, I do think because of the lack of dialogue, if some of you are afraid of subtitles, then maybe this would be a good start, but you might want to be prepared to just feel very sad. But at number 9, we have Luchino Visconti's Rocco and His Brothers, which is the film where I consider it to be all poor country boys being just decimated by the city. But I grew up in the relative country, and I can tell you right now, New York may be as expensive as hell, but I would rather be here than West Virginia. So take that as you will. But Rocco and his brothers is, I mean, Visconti is a director. I've only seen like three or four of his films. So I can say that I feel as passionately for him as I did for like Rossellini or De Sica or Fellini. So it's like, but like, I do feel like, well, what's interesting about this film is it he kind of has a neo-realism style in it because I feel like with Visconti, I think about The Leopard, which is very opulent, but Rocco and his brothers has that like Italian neo-realist vibe that was sort of cultivated by the likes of Rossellini with Rome Open City, for example. But I do think it is a fascinating character study on how moving to the city affects these three brothers. And as you might have guessed, Woody Allen was very much inspired by that title to create Hannah and Her Sisters, which I'll admit it, I do like Hannah and Her Sisters. But yes, Woody Allen's a pariah. We can't really deny that. But number nine, we have Jacques Becker's Le Trou, which is a prison break film. Now, what I think about the prison break movie is I'm not normally into those. I mean, there are some, and in fact, one prison break film, which is pretty iconic, will be featured in an upcoming year here in the 60s. But La Trou is interesting because it very much focuses on prisoners who clearly have done horrible crimes. Some of them we don't even truly get to know on a deep level. So, in that regard, you could argue that the film is very shallow, but for some reason, you still get captivated by these people. And it's like you want to root them on, like you want to root for them to get out, even though a lot of them are like murderers, like just like, or like assault, like they assaulted people. Like it's just like they're not good people. But prisons are complicated. I mean, I don't want to get into that argument right now because that's going to like turn things into a dark direction, but prisons are complicated. But La Trou is a film that I think I might be ranking it lower than some people would, but it is very effective. The atmosphere of it is remarkable. So I do want to single it out like that. Now, next up at number seven, we have La Ventura, which is a film by Michelangelo Antonioni. And this one does divide people. I do think that I can understand why. In fact, this is a film that I used to rank a lot higher, but I felt like I had to because there was a period where I wanted to appear like I was being far more like I wanted like I was a pretentious douche as a teenage film buff. So I felt like this film made me look cultured, but that's not how I feel anymore. I mean, I obviously still think highly of the film. It's on this list, but I can see why people don't like it. But it is about there's three people, so it's two women and a guy, and one of them is played by Monica Vitti. This was like her breakout role, and the one of the ladies disappears, and then the other two, the guy and the other girl, start to debate well whether or not they should develop a relationship themselves despite this grief. In a lot of ways, I like to think of their relationship like Donna and James on Twin Peaks, and I'm sure we all know how captivating Donna and James were on Twin Peaks. I mean Laura Flynn Boyle. I mean that's just fantastic. Yeah. But yes, so that's that one. So now we have at number six Yasujiro Ozu's Late Autumn. Now, Late Autumn is a film that I would say ranks among Ozu's best, which is kind of an interesting. I mean, he made so many great films, it's hard to truly rank them. I mean, I am of the boring group that does think Tokyo Story is his best, but I do feel like after that, it more or less can be flopped around. But like the thing about Ozu is that he did frequently tackle similar themes. Like while I mentioned Naruse dealt with very similar things about like familial relationships, Ozu loved tackling the patriarchy, and Setsuko Hara, who was his muse, was often in these films And usually the films would revolve around like a father is desperate for his daughter to get married, and it's like all about the tradition and maybe should the tradition even still be there. And but Ozu, and I'm going to be talking about Ozu over the next couple of years in this decade, so I will try to keep it brief. Ozu, when you watch his films today, some people might be very put off by it because a lot of the films are just static shots and the people are just like talking into the camera, and it's like, oh, like life's disappointing, isn't it? And it's just like, and it can be a little unnerving, but there's something weird about what he does. Like, there's something so honest and genuine about what he accomplishes with these films, even though they might seem very stiff. Like, you could almost compare it to like the staging could be like a step above like the horrible blocking that was in like early Hollywood talkies where people had to stand still and deliver their lines because there was a microphone hidden in like a stack of books underneath them. And it's like no wonder those films mostly all sucked. But that's not Yasuhiro Ozu. And Late Autumn does tackle a lot of those similar themes. But next up, at number 5, we have the film that beat out Macario for Best Foreign Language Film, and that is this obscure man, Ingmar Bergman, and it is his film The Virgin Spring, which is the film that went on to not expire, it went on to inspire Wes Craven's Last House on the Left. So, yes, this film is about a young girl who is assaulted in the woods and raped and then killed. And then her father seeks to find these assailants and proceeds to kill them. I mean, where's the problem? Like, he took the law in his own hands. I mean, I know people like to say violence is not the answer. Maybe it didn't fully cure him, but it's nice to kill the people that raped and murdered your daughter. I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, if you want to argue about that with me, you can go to the comments, but I don't really. I would like to think that none of you would want to defend a rapist murderer, but maybe that's just me. So, on that note, we'll go on to number 4, which is Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita, which is the film that introduced the term paparazzi to the world. Now, La Dolce Vita is sort of like, you could sort of say it's like a sister film to Eight and a Half, but Fellini was such a sumptuous director. Now, he did come from the neo-realist movement, but he sort of gradually grew into someone who was sometimes whimsical. There was certainly a whimsy to even some of his like bleaker dramas, like Knights of Cabiria, for example. But La Dolce Vita is just a great film about like a journalist who does not know what he wants out of life. Which honestly, and it's also played by Marcello Mastroianni, so that's also related to Eight and a Half. But I do think La Dolce Vita is a very fascinating and beautiful film. I think you could argue that some of Fellini could be a little bit indulgent, but I feel like he's indulgent in the best ways. And while La Dolce Vita is not my favorite of his, I do think it's worthy of the masterpiece status that it has. Now, at number 3, we have one of the few Hollywood films on this list, and that is Billy Wilder's The Apartment. I would be willing to hear anybody out to that might consider this to be the best romantic comedy film ever made. And there are other films that I would put up there with it. Like you could argue City Lights is up there. Hell, you could even argue like When Harry Met Sally is up there for a more somewhat modern example. I mean, that film's almost as old as me. But The Apartment has such a fantastic script. Like The Apartment, I mean, Billy Wilder was Billy Wilder. I mean, this is the man that could write Sunset Boulevard and then turn around and write Some Like It Hot and do Witness for the prosecution. Like he's just, you couldn't really go wrong with him. I would argue Billy Wilder was one of the true beacons of Hollywood filmmaking during that time period, from like the 40s and the 50s. But The Apartment, some of you that might be musical theater fans would actually know the story of The Apartment from the musical Promises, Promises. So it's about a businessman named C.C. Baxter, who's in the film played by Jack Lemmon, who basically rents out his apartment to a superior so they can entertain their mistresses. But one of these mistresses is a little quirky lady named Fran Kubelik, who's played by Shirley MacLaine, who was robbed of the Oscar by Elizabeth Taylor for Butterfield 8 because Hollywood was just so they were so sad because she almost died of pneumonia and got a tracheotomy. But we forgive you for stealing Eddie Fisher from Debbie Riddles. We're so sorry. It's why the award system is fucked up. And yet, I do get fascinated about talking about it. So, I mean, I'm just being a hypocrite right now. But Shirley MacLaine was robbed. The apartment's fantastic. It is practically perfect in every way. That film will be coming up in another year, too. Spoiler alert! Now, at number two, we have Naruse again, and that is what I consider his magnum opus, When a Woman Ascends the Stairs. Oh, God. So in the film, we have Keiko. She is a hostess in a bar, and a lot of the patrons like calling her Mama. And she goes along with it because she wants to entertain. She wants to like keep her job. She's also a widow, but she's also not sure if she wants to keep up with this life. And she might have a way out, but there's just this cycle that she's on where perhaps she's not going to break that cycle. And I remember when I saw the film for the first time, which was a while ago. I would have been in high school, and I didn't really know much about it. I was already a fan of like Kurosawa and Ozu at that point, and I heard that Naruse was a director I should check out because he wasn't getting a lot of like mentions online at the time. But I do find that he had a very fascinating voice because he often would go a little step further than Ozu and like making women far more sympathetic in what might be, as Hollywood would consider, like unsavory, like women who would be punished by the Hays Code standards. So when A Woman Ascends the Stairs is a very important film for this time period, and I do think Naruse deserves a lot more credit. And we will have another film of his coming up as I continue to go through the 60s. But at number one, we actually end with a film that came out of the Hollywood system. And this is not an atypical choice. In fact, a lot of you film people probably already know what I'm going to say, and that is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. I Psycho is interesting because when I watched it, because there is a twist in Psycho, but I'm not going to say what it is, just on the offhand if you have not seen it. But the twist, I feel like I saw it coming from a mile away, and I had no idea what was happening. I just suspected I knew what it was, but it did not affect the film for me. Now, what's most famous about this film is the shower scene, where Janet Leigh is essentially stabbed to death by Norma Bates. I guess they call her Norma Bates. We never really truly hear her name in the movie. And her son, Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, disposes of her body. But what's interesting is the whole movie, we are following that character of Marion, played by Janet Leigh, who happens to be Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, but she did pass away a long time ago. But the fact that that movie starts off with us following her, and then once she's killed, it hard pivots to primarily focusing on Anthony Perkins, and to a lesser extent, the Vera Miles and John Gavin characters, who Vera Miles plays Marion's sister, John Gavin was Marion's lover. They're not exactly, they're not like the best actors of the movie, but Anthony Perkins was unfairly typecast for the role of Norman Bates, and it's a shame because he clearly had a lot of talent. I would have loved to have seen him get more chances. And for some of you theater folk out there, it is said that Anthony Perkins did have an affair with Stephen Sondheim, and that the role of Bobby and Company was originally written with him in mind. So I do like that would have been interesting for me to see. But Psycho is a film that in some ways has not aged well. The ending is a big issue for some because we have that psychiatrist character explaining what happened, and some people feel like that's like spoon feeding us too much as if like we're all idiots. But even like in 1960, it might have been a lot for people to truly like grasp what they've just seen. So I don't truly mind that much. I do think that like, but like the elements of like, okay, I'm just gonna like tell what the film's about. So if you don't want to know, then just like turn this off or something. So obviously Norman Bates is essentially his mother, but he stole her dead body from the cemetery and then tried to treat her body to keep it like essentially as well as he could keep it until she essentially mummified and then took on her personality. So as the film's going on, he is like Norman, but he was often only his mother. So the last scene is him in his like cell in his straight jacket, or not a straight jacket. He's like covered in a blanket because he asked for a blanket, and we don't see him talk, but we hear the thoughts, and it's in the mother's voice. And there is that great shot where he's looking down at the fly and he like looks up with that eerie smile on his face, and then when the screen starts to fade to the Marion's car being pulled out of the swamp, you see like the skull embossed. Such a chilling ending. It's like it goes right back to where we began in a sense. Where like Marion's there. Oh yeah, that's the woman that we were following at the beginning, and she's dead. And also, I do really love that shot of Martin Balsam as Arbogast, the detective, like falling down the stairs, where it's like clearly on like a green screen, and he's like apparently sitting in a chair mimicking that. I do love that shot. So with that, we come to an end. Now, I will admit, I do feel like this video was not as extensive as I would have liked. So please forgive me. I would like to get a little more in depth as we go through the years, but I really just wanted to get the video out. And I hope that you all enjoyed it. I would like to shine a light on some films that maybe some of you have not heard of. Obviously, Psycho is a film that a lot of you have heard of, and even if you haven't seen it, you probably are familiar with. So yeah, that was that. So coming up soon, we will have 1961, which honestly, I'll go ahead and say is not as strong a year as 1960, but we do have a couple of years coming up that I think are doozies. In fact, one year in particular I would say is low key one of my favorite years of cinema ever. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.